and he just did it the right way using creativity. So I think that's kind of like the word that I keep coming back to is creativity. Because if you're going to build a channel based on pranks and stuff, like good luck, man. Good luck having a 10-year career with that. That's going to be exhausting, and you'll probably end up in jail, to be honest. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Video Creator Show, where we talk about all things YouTube. We talk about how to make it on YouTube and just really all things YouTube. So today we're actually talking about the ugly side of YouTube. YouTube was kind of built on the back of bad, disrespectful, kind of catty content. And, you know, it's still continuing to this day. And we're seeing it with the IRL streamers, the in real life streamers. If you never heard of that before, you're going to learn all about that today. But it's pretty crazy. Like I said, it's disrespectful. And I'm excited to talk about it because hopefully we can maybe, who knows, bring some light to this and maybe put an end to it. Or I don't know, maybe Grant's all about it. Maybe Grant's going to become an IRL streamer. But Grant, have you heard?
The toxic kind.
Yeah, the toxic kind that gets millions of views. Have you heard of it though? IRL
I have, yeah.
streaming. Okay,
Yeah,
so what's your impression of it? What's your description?
I mean, so I always saw it as a way of bringing the audience into your real life. Like you're kind of portraying yourself as a normal person, but you're also an entertaining personality. And I think that in and of itself is something that people crave, like audiences crave, because I do feel the last sort of chapter of YouTube has been very Mr. Beastified, highly editing intensive. There's sort of a lack of authenticity, maybe. I wouldn't call Mr. Beast inauthentic or anything, but I would say I think audience retention in this sort of retention demon editing that we've talked about in the past, where you're like every 5 seconds you want something new to be happening. That was kind of the meta. I think it still sort of is, but I do think enough years of that has led to this bursting through of IRL streamers where people are hungry for reality. You know, they're looking for something that feels unfiltered, even if it isn't necessarily, it is perceived as such. So I think that's my perception of it and why it's popular.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The people that we're really talking about right now, and the people that are kind of blowing up through this and giving it a bad name, the streaming style, is guys like Neon, Jack Doherty, Fousy, Vitali, I think it is Vitali, Gideon. Well, Gideon actually is a creator who has recently deleted his channel. I don't think he was actually an IRL streamer, but he created kind of prank videos and at the expense of others to get views. And he had like a coming to God moment where he said, I'm deleting all my videos and I'm going to create just Christian content right now. Did you hear about that?
No, I do think that's funny. It does seem like that is a trajectory a lot of people go on where they sort of go really hard in one direction, whether they're like a stripper for many years or they're just kind of they're somebody who is you could say sinful, or they're just going too hard in one direction and then they become a Christian all of a sudden. I always find it sort of amusing, but also good for him. He's trying to turn over a new leaf. I respect it, you know?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it's a good move. I mean, you feel bad. I think he feels bad, you know, after everything, and that was his move that he made. You know, and a lot of people on YouTube have made big mistakes, right? The Logan Paul Suicide Forest thing where he was not doing streaming or anything, but he made that video and published it, and you know, he had his big apology moment, just like so many content creators have. But just to kind of dive deeper on this new streaming style is, you know, most people just stream video games on Twitch, right, or on Kick, and they're streaming themselves playing video games, and they'll be outlandish. They'll you know, say all kinds of crazy things. People in the chat are saying all kinds of crazy things to them, and they have to keep it entertaining, so they say all kinds of crazy things. Now, I think as that got boring, this new trend, these exact same streamers that were on Twitch doing that, now took to the streets, got a cameraman, and are walking around in public with a cameraman streaming live and just kind of doing things, these degenerate things like, I don't know, I saw one video where this guy, Jack Doherty, was cussing on the stream a bunch, and some guy comes up to him and says, you know, hey, my son's right here, you know, could you please not cuss? And then he's got a bodyguard with him, Jack Doherty does. And so his bodyguard gets all up in the guy's face, and, you know, they make an entertaining video at the expense of this guy and this kid who are just trying to, like, you know, eat lunch, and now are pulled into this big, you know, social media thing. They never asked to be, you know, on camera or anything. And guys like Jack Doherty, Neon, Fousy was doing it for a while, are the ones just, you know, causing all this. Have you seen those videos?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that one in particular, or that creator in particular, but there is definitely a huge trend of walking around on the street right now and interviewing people and creating content off of that, which I think in and of itself is actually really entertaining. I really like types of videos like that. There is a consent aspect to this that I think can get gray. And again, I want to be clear. Overall, I like this style of content, but I do think creators should be aware that you are just sort of walking up to somebody on the street. You don't know what kind of day they're having. They didn't consent to being filmed, probably. And if you're just kind of sticking a camera in people's face, like, people don't necessarily know how to act when the camera is on. Like, it's a skill, and it's a skill that most people don't have. And when you do that, and if your vibe is kind of weird when you're walking up to this person, like, they might react badly, and I don't think that's fair to that person. You know, like, it might make for an entertaining video, but you're also painting this person in a certain light that I think isn't necessarily fair. And that's where a lot of the toxicity can come from, is just this sort of, you're kind of using random people for content, and you don't know them, and you don't know what they want or what they're comfortable with. And I do I do feel we should be careful. We should be very careful.
Yeah, no, totally. And dude, if you spent a couple hours watching what they're doing on these streams, it's just ridiculous. And yeah, it's like, to me, it's the ultimate form of clout chasing. Like, you are just trying to go out there and pick fights with people to create the content, to get the views, and that is clear as day, you know? And so that's kind of where I kind of draw the line. I mean, interviews on the street is a little bit different. You know, that's not streaming, number one. And number two, things can be edited. And I do also enjoy that content a lot. Interviews on the street, interviews and stuff like that is great. And it's a great strategy, actually, to create entertaining content, especially vertical videos. But the live streaming, they're not out there really even interviewing people. They're just walking around. I don't even know what they're doing, to be honest, just looking for trouble. But do you think this style of walking around, live streaming, can be done tastefully? And if so, any ideas?
Yeah, I think it can be done tastefully. I think a lot of it still goes back to kind of what I said earlier about consent and respecting people, and understanding that just because you have a camera in the situation, that might make somebody uncomfortable in and of itself.
Yeah.
And that's something you should be aware of. And if you pick up on that, maybe kind of dip out of that situation, just say, hey, thanks for your time, and then kind of move on. And that, to me, seems like the most tasteful way to do it. In it, unfortunately, I think it can be really entertaining if there is this sort of blow up, uncomfortable situation that you create. And there's almost an incentive to make things kind of toxic.
Exactly.
So it's not surprising to me that there's so many issues right now with creators being toxic, because I think it sells. Like, you know, look at any trashy reality TV show. It's kind of, the more toxic the people are, the more entertaining it is. You can't look away. So I just think it's so much harder to be wholesome than it is to be toxic, and while still, like, making a good living off of this. So I do think it's possible. I just think you have to be really creative, and it requires so much more creativity and level-headedness and planning and business savviness. It's like, you just have to be a step above. And I just think, just in general, most people aren't that. You know, most people are average, right? Just by definition. So it's hard, man. It's hard.
Yeah, and I think there is a way to do it, like, right? Like, and it takes, like you said, it's harder to do it tastefully, and it takes more planning, because imagine I say, okay, I'm going to do a stream. I'm going to go drive my car 125 miles per hour in my Tesla. That would be a pretty fun and exciting stream that would keep people on until I actually get into my car and I make it happen. And yeah, it's breaking the law a little bit, I guess. So maybe that's the line, but it's not hurting other people. It's not
Unless you crash.
unless you crash. So okay, maybe there is a part of that that's
You're putting other people in danger.
yeah. So there is a part of that there, maybe, but at least I'm putting a little bit of creativity into going and making a video that doesn't technically have other people in the stream, right? Like what these people are doing is just no plan, just about to hit record, go to the mall. This guy's filming me. I got my big bodyguard with me. Security comes up to me. Hey, sorry, you can't film here. Why? Public place. Why? It's a public place. Why? I can, and then now it's the bodyguard getting in there, and there's no like plan really. Like I was just trying to give a demonstration that like to do this tastefully, like do it just like a YouTube video where there's like, there's a topic, there's a reward at the end that you're trying to give your audience, not just walking around acting crazy. So yeah, anyways, to me, this is some of the lowest form of clout chasing that I've seen. I mean, clout chasing has been happening since day one. I mean, why did Logan Paul even post that Suicide Forest video? Because views, right? He thought it, he probably considered, I shouldn't do it. He's like, it's going to go viral though. It's going to be, it's going to make the news. And so that's the reason he did it. And so, but people need to learn from other people's mistakes, man. I mean, come on now. So, okay. So, real quick, I want to just continue the conversation of kind of like, disrespectful content, stuff that makes other people the butt of the joke. Because like I said, it's been happening forever, but it's kind of like a spectrum, right? Like Logan Paul's video over here is probably like, one of the worst things you could do. Like what these streamers are doing is pretty bad, but there's distasteful content on YouTube that maybe isn't that far. At what point do you kind of draw the line? And like for me, I'm thinking of creators like Nelk Boys, right? That kind of create raunchy content where they're like smoking a lot of cigarettes and just drinking a lot, but just really just having a good time partying and stuff and making content off it. Not really, they do actually do some pranks that are kind of pretty funny, but anyways. In that kind of content, or Eric was a guy who like snuck into the Super Bowl or something, like he did some stuff like that. At what point do you kind of draw the line and what's acceptable to you in your head?
Mm-hmm. So I'm always a big fan of mischievousness, right? Like I see the world as too boring. And when people seek to upset that boredom, I'm a big fan. So like sneaking into the Super Bowl, yes, it's illegal, but I don't see anything wrong with that on a moral level. I think stuff like that is great. You're breaking the rules and you're not hurting anybody. The NFL is going to get mad at you? Who cares? The NFL is going to be fine. So I see stuff like that and sort of breaking laws of that sort as benign. And even I would encourage it to, depending on what it is, like it's a gray area, right? But I would say you want to be really careful about what laws you're breaking and who is being affected by this. The best judgment I find is how do these people behave on like unfiltered podcasts, right? Because that's such a good way to see who is this person actually when there's not all this editing that's going on. There was the Nelk Boys were on Andrew Schultz's podcast a while ago, and I remember one of them, he was like on his phone a lot of the time, and then Andrew Schultz like called him out on it and was basically like trying to get them to grow up a little bit. And like don't get me wrong, they're very talented, what they're doing is working. I am not trying to hate on them, but I do think with the whole clout chasing thing, it does sort of incentivize people to be immature and to sort of seek short-term validation. And so in this episode with Andrew Schultz in this unfiltered podcast, it was very clear that they hadn't really developed that sort of like deeper personality to them. Like he wasn't very receptive to what Andrew Schultz was saying, like, hey, you seem like you're bored, you don't want to be here. Like I don't really feel like I feel almost disrespected by the way you're behaving. And his answers to questions were sort of vague, and he just seemed like he's on this big podcast and he didn't like appreciate it or seem like he wanted to be there. And it just, I think that to me was a clear indication of like, where are they going to be in 10 years? I think if he doesn't kind of, if they don't develop that kind of inner personality of like respect for others and appreciating what they have and being present, then it's not going to last. And if you like, that is sort of the foundation, I think, of a long-term YouTube career, is like, how do you treat people who how do you treat people when the cameras aren't on? And ironically, I think podcasts are a good way of seeing that. So I generally, I'll judge people based on how they behave on podcasts a lot. And maybe that's not fair, but I think it's a really good way of kind of unpacking who somebody is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree with what you said too about involving other people or hurting other people too, because to me, that's where the line gets drawn. It's like if you're creating content and it's pranks, it's whatever, but it's kind of like no one cries because of it or no one gets mad because of it, and it doesn't involve hurting other people, I think it's fair game. I think of some of the old school pranksters like Roman Atwood, and I don't know, there was kind of an old school group of people that used to create prank stuff, and to me they seemed a little bit more tasteful than nowadays, where people are willing to do anything, which kind of brings me to my next one, where we talked about already a little bit, these interview style podcasts, right? Where you go on the street and you got a microphone, you're interviewing people and you're asking them questions. I have seen some videos that are just like, they go up to a husband and wife and they say the first question, will you do an interview? Yeah, we'll do an interview. Do you trust your husband? Yeah. All right. Take out his or whatever, take out his phone and look through all his text messages right now. And like they put these people in these like really tough situations. Mm-hmm. Or like, are you faithful to your wife? Yes, I am. All right, prove it to her. Let her look through all your DMs right now, and then they're doing that on camera. What do you think about that? Is that fair game?
Yeah, I think it's fair game, because if you walk up to somebody and you're like, "Hey, can I do an interview?" and like they see the camera, you're consenting to whatever is about to happen. And if they ask you to do something you're not comfortable with, I do think you just need to be prepared to say no if you don't want somebody going through your text messages or whatever. And I do think there is, like, for a normal person on the street who's not used to being in the spotlight at all, like, I could see how that might be sort of unfair. Like, it blindsides you with the sort of bombasticness of the questions that are asked. But I do think it's fair game. Maybe just I do enjoy content like that. But it's if you say yes to the interview, you got to be ready. And I think that's okay. I don't see anything against it. I think interviews like that have given me a really interesting and in-depth perspective on like what other people think. Like, there was a video I watched recently. This guy walked up to men and women and was like, "What do you think is wrong with modern dating?" Like, you would ask, like, "Are you single? And what's your experience with dating been like?" And everybody was complaining about it. And it was really interesting to hear the perspectives of men and women, because, as a man, I have my perspectives, and then women have their own. And some of the questions were pretty juicy, of just like, how, what kind of man are you looking for? Like, what's the worst date you've ever been on? I just think questions like that really give you an insight into kind of the normal person on the street. And I think there's a value in that is worth sharing. And maybe sometimes somebody's like, I kind of regret doing that interview, but I think that's okay. I would feel bad for somebody who feels that way, but I'm just saying, if somebody walks up to you and is like, "I want to do an interview," be ready for whatever is coming next, and be ready to like walk away or give some kind of vague answer. Like, you really have to protect your boundaries, I think, in that situation. And maybe a lot of people aren't ready for it, but you got to be ready for it if you say yes.
Yeah, and that's a lesson learned, I think, in this new digital age and just the world we live in now. It's like cameras are everywhere, really, where, if something happens anywhere on the planet, I feel like if you dig deep enough, you're going to be able to find some footage of the incident and whether it's a surveillance camera in the end or whatever. But yeah, that is the world we live in. But I will say that a lot of these things are just kind of predatory. I can think of a lot of ones where it's college students doing the interviews on a Friday night with a bunch of drunk girls out at the bars, and they're asking them all these crazy questions. And I'm like, these girls are putting that out onto the internet, what they're saying, and it's just like,
and they're drunk.
Yeah, and that's predatory, right? So,
sure.
But if, this is a great style of content, and you don't have to be predatory, right? But like interview content in general, like just going on the street and asking people about whatever niche you're in. Maybe you are, I don't know, a lawn mowing company and you have a YouTube channel, like going and asking people questions about their lawns and their lawn health and stuff. Like that's just a great strategy. And like you said, it's entertaining for people that are interested in that kind of stuff. I think, at least. I mean, I can think of a couple different niches that people are kind of using that style of content. So yeah, I think that's all fair game. It's good stuff. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about back in the day a little bit, because like I said, YouTube was kind of built on this kind of like prank content and that kind of stuff. When did you first start watching prank videos, and do you remember who it was, or do you remember any of the specific pranks that you have watched?
I mean, I've never been a huge prank connoisseur, but I remember some of the first early pranksters like Sam Pepper, Joey Salads, kind of that era. I feel like it hasn't changed that much, because it was pretty. It started out, I think, relatively benign, but then once the low-hanging fruit got plucked, then people started faking things, or really going out of their way to like make people uncomfortable just to get a reaction. And I think that's sort of the issue with pranks in general, is like, how do you keep upping the ante? Like, how do you keep this interesting once you've kind of built your career around it? It's like there's so many ways that you can screw up, and there's so few ways to keep it going in a way that is wholesome, that continues to get you as many views as you were getting when you were plucking the low-hanging fruit. So yeah, back in the day, I kind of always saw this as an issue. I don't think this is a new problem by any means. Yeah, I mean, you had like Fousytube. I know he had a lot of kind of mental breakdowns and mental health issues that he dealt with, and that played into his content a lot. Man, I don't think YouTube is that different than it was in like 2014. I think the only difference now is there's a lot more people on YouTube who are trying to make it on YouTube, and because it's more competitive, you've sort of amplified this problem of, how do I up the ante? Like, how do I stand out? And that's not a new problem. I think it's just gotten more competitive. And so that's why we're probably seeing more people now who are doing these issues, or who are being toxic and kind of interviewing people or pranking people in a way that isn't fair. But that was always happening. It might just be happening more now. And that's my perspective, is things don't change that much, but maybe it's gotten more prevalent. Yeah, it's just that's my take. Things don't change that much. They just don't.
Yeah, it's a cycle too, I think with content on YouTube, like just like fashion, old trends will start coming back, and it's just a circular movement, just reinventing. And the old school pranks, the ones Fousy did, some of my all-time favorites, by the way. I always love me some pranks growing up, on YouTube. And My favorite one is the Mortal Kombat one where Fusi's in an elevator and somebody gets in, the doors close, and he's dressed up as a Mortal Kombat character, Sub-Zero or something, and you just hear the music, din, 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 and he's just like getting ready to go, and then this goes fight or whatever, and he just starts punching the air and stuff, and the other person in the elevator gets all freaked out and screams, ah! And he's just like, da, 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 da. Or like sometimes they'll like get ready to fight, like they get prepared. Yeah,
And that's funny.
it was so funny. I've watched that one a ton of times. And, the person gets scared, but, we are laughing at the expense of this person maybe ruining their day, or maybe they don't care. I mean, if it was me personally, I wouldn't let it get me down. But
Yeah, I wouldn't care. I'd
but
be stoked. Thanks for the attention,
yeah, I think Karen would be pretty upset if that was pulled on her. So I think there are a lot of people that would be upset with that, But
Well, that's the funny thing about these prank videos is you are like you don't know who this person is exactly, and if somebody is a Karen and they are just super full of shit, like it gets revealed, and they didn't sign up to get it revealed, but it's also, I mean, I think dressing up as a Mortal Kombat character and doing silly things in the elevator, that's just harmless and funny. Like I don't see like my judgment on that is that's a fair, amusing thing to do. And if you react badly to it, or you're just being really mean, like, how do you do why are you doing this? It's sort of you're kind of revealing yourself. And maybe you didn't ask for that, but also maybe there's something about yourself that can change. And this is sort of like this court of public opinion where I do think these types of videos have revealed a lot of people and have kind of shown the world like patterns of behavior that people don't like maybe loosen up a bit, maybe have a bit more fun, maybe don't yell at the waiter at Red Lobster, maybe there's so many. I just think this has sort of opened up a lot of conversation about what is acceptable and what is not in a way that's really interesting, which is why I think these pranks, when they are wholesome or harmless, can be really interesting, even if it goes wrong. Um, as long as the prank itself isn't inherently predatory, I don't see anything wrong with it. I think it reveals interesting things about people.
yeah, I can see that viewpoint. Definitely. I think my take is that, yeah, I'll consume it. Yeah, I won't really feel that bad for that person in these kind of harmless pranks, but I would never do that myself. I wouldn't feel comfortable putting people in those kind of positions. Like, I guess maybe this sounds kind of egocentric, but I guess I hold myself to a higher standard as far as I'm not going to go clout chase and put people in that situation just for views. Because essentially that's what it is. And when you say it like that, it sounds bad, right? Like, the only reason you're doing that is for views. Come on, And it's true, but at the same time, that's really why most people are creating videos in general, is to get the views. So it's just about, for me, how can you do it ethically? And for me, how can you just be more creative? Like, use your creativity to get views, not at the expense of other people, basically.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And I think that's why I see somebody's personality and how they treat people in their regular real life when the camera is not on. I think if you have that aspect of yourself down, you're going to be so much less likely to start clout chasing at the expense of everything else. And it's so important, I think, to be a balanced person and to not let the fame get to your head. Because if your motivations are just clout and views and fame and money, man, like, you're not seeing things holistically. And I know that's kind of a loaded, corny word, but like, if you aren't seeing the world holistically, then and you are doing these prank videos that are sort of like you said, it's you hold yourself to a higher standard. I think the reason that it's easy to say that is because it is kind of a gray area. And if you don't have your personal stuff on lock, you're going to cross over into the darkness very easily. So it's almost like, what are your motivations? Like, because even if you start out being benign or relatively wholesome, if deep down your motivations are attention and money, it's just going to go wrong. Like, you're going to start making bad decisions. You're going to start listening to other people who have the same motivations. You're going to start ignoring people who have better motivations. And you just got to be so careful with that. Like, it can be really dangerous when your motivations are out of whack and you don't know how to treat people when the cameras are off. Like, truly.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get what you mean there because there are people that could go and create these prank videos that are just really good people too in general that just want to create entertaining content, and in the real world they're just great people, you know. So I get that. You know, we're talking about clout chasing and doing it for the views, and social experiments is a great example of somebody just kind of clout chasing, doing it for the views. We're talking about where, you know, what would happen if I gave a homeless man $20 or $100, you know, and then they make a whole video out of it. And like, what's your take on that? Like, do you think that it's okay? Those kind of things are okay to do? Like, you know, comes down to this, right? Like, they make a video. I donated $10,000 to charity, but the only reason they made it is because, or the only reason they would donate that money is because they can make a video about it. You know, they would never donate it if they couldn't make the video. You know, stuff kind of like that.
Right. I mean, man, I always feel like, and maybe this is overly simplistic, if you're donating money to charity or you're doing something that benefits the world, that's a good thing. And I'm glad that it got done, even if it was for content. Like, I know Mr. Beast gets criticized for this a lot, but it sort of depends also, like, how good is the thing that you did? Like, giving somebody $20, I mean, $20 is helpful, especially if you're homeless and haven't eaten in like a day. I think it's okay to do stuff like that. It just, like, how helpful is the thing that you're actually doing? Like, 10 grand is a lot of money. But also, I guess if you're starting out and you don't have a lot of money, like, you're not going to donate $10,000 probably. But my take on it is, I think it's still a good thing. I do think, like, if you're ultimately not a good person, it will eventually get revealed and you will have to deal with the consequences of that. And man, it's really stressful when you have everything blowing up and all this hate being put towards you. Like, the court of public opinion will try you. And I do see a sense of justice in that. So I'm good with this type of content, and partially just because I do see the court of public opinion as, even though it's not always fair, it will always do its best to bring justice to people's reputation. And it's, I don't know, man. Like, and some of it too is just sort of the vibe of the video. Like, is this person treating this homeless person like a person, or are they just like, okay, you're just kind of a character in my video and I'm going to give you some money? Like, that reaction wasn't good enough, can you do that again? Like, here, I'm going to hand you the money again, can you act more excited? Like, reality TV show producers do that a lot, and it's really corny and annoying. I think if you're not willing to let things play out as they are, then I do think there's something wrong with that. I do see that as kind of selfish, but, you know, it it depends. Like, it's a gray area. Yeah, overall I support it, but man, you got to be careful. Um, you can just really, you can really try to appear as a good person, but ultimately you're a fraud if you're not careful.
Yeah, yeah, and you bring up a good point about the you know, the inauthenticity, like do it again or say it like this, because so many of these type of videos are fake, right? Like with the pranks and the social experiments, you know. And it's really hard to tell. Even the interviews that we talked about earlier, the interview content, sometimes that's all that stuff is fake. So, yeah, that's a whole nother kind of topic in itself, is just fake content. It's been going on for a long time on YouTube too. And there's some classic examples. I can't remember the name of it, but there's this guy who, you know, his dad like ran over his PlayStation 3 with the lawnmower. There's like a whole series of this one guy, and it was all fake. It was all fake. And him and his family and him, I don't know, just getting all mad about all kinds of different stuff. Have you ever, you know what I'm talking about? You seen that?
Not that situation in particular, but yeah, fake videos in general.
Yeah.
It. Hmm.
So
They can annoy me. Yeah.
yeah, and
They're
you don't
annoying.
always, you can't always tell. Like sometimes you just can't tell,
Yeah.
and then it comes out later. Oh, but all his pranks were fake, and you're just like, kind of ruins it
Dang
for
it.
the viewer. You're like, that was one of my favorite videos. But okay, let's. We've talked a lot about streaming and just different types of content, and whether you think a social experiment is ethical or unethical, just know that's a great content type too. Like do it in a way that's tasteful, but those kind of videos do well. What niche are you in? How can you do some sort of experiment, social experiment, and that will normally get some views, man. Do you agree with that, or?
Oh yeah, totally. Like, I mean, social experiments in general, like as long as you're using that term fairly and it's not just taking advantage of people for the expense of content, like it's interesting to see how people's minds work and how people react to unexpected things. And I'm all for it, but man, like it can like we've been talking about, it can get toxic pretty quickly. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and as far as toxic content goes and the ugly side of YouTube, we've covered, like I said, there's certain kinds of pranks and stuff like that, but there's other types of toxicity on YouTube too. And you were going to talk a little bit about the next one, which is the Onision. Is that how you pronounce it?
Onision.
Onision. So, why did you want to bring that up in this episode? What happened there? What's the story?
Hmm. So Onision is one of the YouTube OGs. He has been around. He was actually making videos since before YouTube. I think he's currently 37, and he started making videos when he was like 17. So he's been around for a long time. Like if you were on YouTube in 2007 to 2012, like the really early days, you saw his videos. He was everywhere. He has, I think, 2 billion views across all of his channels. Like he was a really big deal. However, speaking of the toxic side of YouTube and the importance of motivations, he really didn't change much between the age of 17 and 37. He's like still the same guy. He even like looks very similar. He still has like long hair and clear skin. He's still like he's a teenager still. And he like he started out by making silly videos and just being really raw and unfiltered. And a lot of one of the videos that really took off was him like dressed in a banana costume. I am a banana, and he's like dancing. And it's very silly. It was on the news, and that was like 2010. Um, and he used his platform just to like date really young girls, a lot of which were underage. He was like grooming women and like who were 17 and even into his 30s he was doing this. And like, man, it's almost like he didn't evolve at all. I think when you're 17 and your goal is to just date hot girls and get famous, I think that's okay. But when you're like 30 and that's still all you're trying to do, like, he would post, he'd make these blog posts about starting a new religion. And our goal as humans is to protect the earth, and we were chosen by Gaia to keep this planet safe, and we're destroying it. And like, okay, great, but like all you're doing is making silly videos and trying to have threesomes, like and so again, grooming, manipulation. He was incredibly abusive to women and girls he was dating, like all just really bad, incredibly selfish stuff. And I think this is because, I mean, one, he's clearly narcissistic, but two, like his motivations didn't evolve or change. Like starting with shallow desires, I think is okay, but it gets nastier and nastier the older you get. Like you start to get really stagnant and corrupted if you don't start doing if you don't start evolving. So like, he kind of had this spiritual aspect to him. I think, I mean, Jesus, he could have started a cult and that could have been even worse. But like, he could have started some charity to help clean up the world, or kind of like Mr. Beast is doing with his philanthropy arm. Like, he was still, when he was 35, making the same, very similar silly videos, just trying to get with his fans. And like, to me, that is, unfortunately, that is sort of a toxic side of things. I think that is not going to change anytime soon. I think there's always going to be people with those sort of shallow motivations, but to avoid it, I think you really do, like, you have to grow up. You have to, like, look within yourself and be like, why am I doing this? Why is it important to me? And what is the meaning of everything I'm doing? Like, because you can make videos and get views maybe indefinitely, but if you don't have some kind of meaningful goal that you're building towards, whether that's creating a charity that actually is aligned with your religious or spiritual values, whether that is even starting a channel that maybe there's more complexity to it than ranting to a camera about your relationship drama, like, I think as you get older, you get more savvy and hopefully more wise, and you can use that knowledge and wisdom to build things that are ever more complex and hopefully helpful to the world. And but if you never dig deep enough and look at your real motivations, then they're not going to change. So I just say this as a warning to anybody, especially if you're like a teenager and you're just starting out. Like, yeah, maybe you do just want attention and you want girls to like you or boys to like you. That's fine. But man, at a certain point, if you don't grow up, there's going to be a court case against you. Yeah, like Onision is, I mean, he's going to court now for grooming and abuse and harassment. I mean, it's bad. It's really bad. I don't see him wiggling out of this. And it's just, you don't want to go there, man. Like, you really don't. And yeah, in a way, I'm grateful I always had like a good, solid friend group, and I never let any attention I got from YouTube go to my head too much. And you got to be careful. You got to be careful.
So it's not so much the content he's creating that's bad. It's just the person he is. That's basically what you're saying. Like,
Yes,
what's the content?
yeah.
Like, what's like an example of a video that he might make?
So especially when he was in the midst of all of this sort of drama, where he was inviting girls to his house and trying to have threesomes and stuff, a lot of his content during that era was based around the relationship drama.
Okay.
So yeah, his content was generally either silly skits where, you know, he's dressed as a banana, or he's like joking about I don't know, PC culture or something. Or he had one video where he like took his shirt off. He's a vegetarian, and he was like, "Look at my vegetarian body! Isn't it disgusting?" And it was actually really funny. Like, he clearly has a sense of humor.
Got it.
But his videos had this sort of like fun shallowness to them, maybe. But yeah, then kind of as time went on, the shallowness turned into, it was almost like he needed the drama to keep happening.
Yeah.
So that he could keep ranting about it to the camera, like, oh, you know, my girlfriend's crazy. She keeps saying that she doesn't want me to date this other girl, but, you know, she said it was cool at first, and now blah 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 blah. So that was kind of his style. It just these silly skits slash drama videos where everything was coming from his perspective, you know.
Yeah. No, I get it. It's like, and I think it's common, right? It's almost like the child star syndrome, right? Where these child stars grow up and they're on drugs, or they don't end up being very good people. It's like that ego that gets messed up when you get that kind of recognition at a young age. You think you're somebody, you think you're special, you think you're the best, you think you're the man. And then yeah, I mean, you look at all kinds of celebrities that have thought they were above the law, kind of. And then the second part to it is getting caught in the YouTube rat race, where you have to continuously put out entertaining stuff. So you're almost becoming a bad person on purpose, so that you have videos that will create the controversy and get you the views and keep you relevant. I mean, it's the Fousy thing. You know, everyone talks about Fousy's mental health, and yeah, at this point, he definitely has some real challenges. But I think a lot of it was because of for Fousy, it's been up and down. I mean, he got really big, and then then nobody cared about him, and then he did a bunch of stuff to become relevant, you know, and that's what it is. It's like they're people trying to get back into the news. So yeah, it's that cycle, that YouTube cycle is the second part sounds like this guy got caught up in.
Yeah, and it's so true. People get dependent on drama to keep themselves relevant, and I think that's a huge issue too. Is I like to think that if you're able to build a YouTube channel to a certain size, you can use those skills to make money in other ways, and it doesn't mean you have to stop doing YouTube. I just think if you are at this certain point and your lifestyle costs a certain amount of money and you sort of become dependent on getting that amount of views, but fame by its nature fluctuates. Like you're not always going to be at the top. It's like this. And if you're not careful, it'll keep going down and down and down. And that's what they're terrified of is going down and down and down and never recovering. But I think if you can find a way to either start a business or somehow leverage the skills you have. I mean, one thing I do, I'm a freelancer, and that's how I make most of my money is using my skills to help other people build their YouTube channels. And now I'm not dependent. Like I could have gone on Treesicle, my, big channel that was very successful, and done whatever I had to do to stay famous. Like we made one like series of drama videos essentially that did really well, and I could have kept doing that, and I could have made a lot of money, and it wouldn't have been that hard. But I didn't feel like I wanted to participate in that anymore. It felt like I was sort of commenting on situations that had nothing to do with me, and so I essentially sidestepped the attention, took a step back, and found other ways to make money. And now, like when I do want to continue making YouTube videos, which I still do occasionally, I'm not dependent on being as bombastic and attention seeking as possible. And I think a lot of people, they sort of lack that balance and perspective when they do reach a certain amount of fame. Because yeah, financially, I think finances are a huge impact on that. But also, just you get addicted to the fame and the attention and the comments and the Instagram messages, and like, it can, man, it can be hard to let go of. It can be hard to like be more private unless you really have found peace within yourself. And I think that's something that a lot of these personalities don't have. And I mean, geez, like this is sort of a tangent, but like, I got a lot of messages from fans, and I used to answer pretty much all of them. And a lot of the conversations went something like this: "Hey, Grant, nice to meet you. Let me tell you the worst thing that's ever happened to me." And like they would tell me shit that happened to them that was like, oh my god, that's horrible. And I'd try to like help them through it, but at a certain point, like I can't be there for all these people. And what this speaks to, I think, is um when people look at you and you have a following, they think that you have figured out a secret, and they think that you are somehow better than most people, and it can be addictive to have people perceive you like that. And the further away you get from the spotlight, the less people are going to see you that way. The less girls are going to slide into your DMs and think that you're the epitome of masculinity or something, just because now you're more of a normal guy. um and yeah, I think a lot of the toxicity comes from that addiction to fame and wanting to be perceived as more than human, because that makes you feel better about yourself. But ultimately, it's not going to fill the void. You have to fill the void. The attention is not going to do it. So it's an addiction. It's an addiction.
Yeah, and with all that said, take all that you just said right now, and that's the reason that I would not recommend somebody start a channel like this, because you're starting a channel based on this toxicity that you're gonna have to keep up with forever. So don't ever, base it like, look at Casey Neistat. Casey Neistat had such a great YouTube career, never in the drama too much. I can't think of one thing. Never making other people uncomfortable or anything. And he just did it the right way using creativity. So I think that's kind of like the word that I keep coming back to is creativity. because if you're going to build a channel based on pranks and stuff, like good luck, man. That good luck having a 10-year career with that. That's going to be exhausting, and you'll probably end up in jail, to be honest. So it's kind of so okay, let's go ahead and talk about maybe the most important part of the whole episode right now. With these IRL streamers, they do it on a platform called Kick because it's less censored than Twitch, right? And I think it might be some sort of YouTube competitor too. I don't know. I haven't really got on there too much, but there's these other ones popping up that are less censored than YouTube and Twitch, allow all this kind of crazy streaming and stuff, and just all this kind of content that we talked about on this episode. Do you think that YouTube needs to step in and do something, or do you think YouTube is already doing a good job kind of as far as censoring this kind of stuff?
I mean, I'm usually in favor of YouTube censoring less rather than more. Again, I think the court of public opinion is really important here. It's like, I think YouTube is doing a fine job personally. Maybe only because if they go too far, I just think that's worse than not going far enough generally. Because yeah, I don't necessarily trust a corporation to bring justice more than people just deciding not to watch, or just letting sort of the trajectory of somebody's career play out, unless they're really doing something illegal, in which case I think they'll get sued anyway and have to deal with that. So yeah, I think it's okay for YouTube to be doing what they're doing now. And there are certain situations like the, SS Sniper Wolf and Jack's film situation where she doxed him and YouTube kind of gave her a slap on the wrist, really. That I felt like they should have done more. But I don't think she should have been like permanently banned or anything. Maybe she should have gotten suspended. Something like that. Maybe YouTube seems to either like ban people or not do anything. And maybe there's more of a middle ground here of like suspension, just to show that they're serious. And it, I think, should always be kind of done according to the law, right? Like, I don't think it's legal to, like, isn't that a form of harassment? Like, showing people where you live and then just sort of implying that you should go mess with them, that's harassment. That is illegal. you know but yeah, I also am aware that if YouTube goes too hard in the other direction, then the platform would get really stale and uninteresting. But I like to tend towards chaos, I think. So I guess overall I'm happy with the way YouTube is doing things, maybe just because I'm afraid of what they might do,
Yeah, and if they do start banning people or whatever, then they are in jeopardy of losing those creators, and those creators jumping ship and going to these other platforms, which is basically what's happening. But yeah, I think with all things considered, I mean, YouTube does have a responsibility to monitor their platform, and I mean, as of now, I think it's a little bit of still, even to this day, even though YouTube does censor a lot, I still think it is kind of the wild, wild west, to where a lot of content gets put on there that I would not want my 10-year-old child viewing. But really, that's on me as the parent, I guess. But man, it is a tough thing. It is a tough thing these days how kids are getting devices at age 8 to 10, and you get access to the world, man. When I was young, I didn't have access to everything like that. The internet was just kind of becoming its thing. So it's just different times. But I don't have an official opinion on it. I think I agree with you. I think YouTube does a great job right now with what they do keep and what they do censor and stuff. And, they hold the cards, right? YouTube holds the cards. They control the monetization. And you better be careful. Someday they could say, oh, that's, too far on the disrespectful spectrum, demonetized. And then, people are going to have to adjust and stuff. But yeah, I think for right now, I think it's good. I also agree that we should not give them the golden keys to just kind of do everything. Although they have it, man. They have all the cards. But all right. Well, hey, any other final thoughts on the ugly side of YouTube, Grant?
Just, I feel like the ugly side of YouTube always comes from shallow desires and an inability to grow up and an addiction to fame. And if you can figure out a way to heal whatever is missing within yourself and not focus on this addiction, then you're always going to come out on top, even if it doesn't end with you being as famous as you could have been. I think you'll help the world more, you'll feel more fulfilled, and your career will still be successful, even if it isn't necessarily what your 17-year-old self would have wanted. But I think that's a good thing, is to kind of let yourself grow and be patient. And yeah, just try to be a better person, be kind to people when the cameras aren't on, and let that carry you through. And that's where I'll leave it.
That's a great place to leave it. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can follow us there as well. And with all that said, you guys have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye.